Para sa akin, napaka-importante talaga na maging aware tayo with this chemical in our brain. It is involved in so many things. This is actually linked to depression. I love gaming. I love video games. Pero bakit parang mas nasa stress pa ako dahil hindi ko na ma-enjoy yung nilalaro ko. I just play for the sake of playing kasi I need to play or deserve ko mag-play after mag-work. You can't remove dopamine. Dopamine detox is not a thing because it's what's responsible for us to have drive in life, to want things, to pursue things. So the problem is not really dopamine. Bakit yung mga bagay na naeenjoy mo dati parang wala nang dating ngayon? Bakit ang bilis mong mabored kahit may ginagawa ka naman? Now, this isn't about just losing interest. There is a biological reason behind it, why boredom feels stronger today. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about what dopamine is, how excessive stimulation can cause depression, the dopamine cycle na nagagamit natin sa maling paraan nowadays, and why we get bored with things we used to enjoy, and how to fix it. Now, what dopamine is? Para sa akin, napaka-importante talaga na maging aware tayo with this chemical in our brain kasi it is involved in so many things. So, what dopamine is, it's a brain chemical that affects motivation and desire. It's not what makes you enjoy something, but rather it's what makes you want something. It is what makes you pursue anything. And that it's regardless kung ang passion mo is video games or singing, music, or you're an athlete. The dopamine is involved in any endeavor that we have in life. And so dopamine can also be considered the currency for motivation. And like any currency, if you keep spending it, it doesn't end well. And so that leads us to the dopamine cycle that we have. So may mga araw na ang dali mong ma-motivate. May mga araw na wala kang gana. Part of that has to do with your brain's baseline, dopamine baseline. Ito yung normal mong level ng motivation at interest. How things feel by default. Your normal state. Iba-iba to person to person. So, some people by default are a bit mellower. Some are parang mas hyper sila. So, it differs talaga. Depende sa kung anong. I think it's related to genetics. So, yun. And then, the peak. So, first is the baseline. And then, when you actually do something that spikes your dopamine, you reach a peak. And this peak, ito yung pinakamataas na level ng excitement or stimulation. Kapag may ginawa kang stimulating, tumataas yung dopamine mo above your baseline. So, a couple of examples are pag nagsascroll ka sa social media, when you see posts that are interesting to you, your dopamine level rises depending on how interesting that post is. When you are gaming, when you are attracted to someone, just simply seeing that person or anticipating to see that person can rise your dopamine levels. And then also exciting moments, mga certain events in our lives na exciting to us. Now, what you feel is excitement, focus, at yung feeling na gusto ko pa. Ito yung pleasure side. So, the dopamine cycle has this thing called the pleasure and pain balance. So, this peak that we're talking about is the pleasure side. Now, talking about the side of the pain is the crash. So, we have our baseline dopamine that's depende sa atin, person to person. And then, the peak, and that depends on how exciting or how dopamine inducing the activity was, and then followed by a crash. After nung peak, hindi lang siya babalik sa normal. Bababa pa siya, and hindi siya babalik sa baseline. It goes below baseline. And depende rin to kung gaano ka-exciting yung experience mo. So, kung nanonood ka sa video, kung andito yung baseline mo, and then you do an activity, and talagang sobrang na-excite ka sa activity na yon, kung gaano kataas, ganun kalala yung crash. Ganun. So, what you feel in this phase of the cycle is boredom, restlessness, at saka para bang may kulang. Ito yung kabilang side nga ng pleasure. Ito yung pain. Pero hindi siya basta-basta pain. It doesn't surface as parang physical pain. It's pain in the form of craving, wanting what induced the dopamine in the first place. Kasi that's like our body's natural reaction. Whenever our dopamine drops, it tends to try to go back to baseline. And yun yung reason bakit we tend to crave things. And every time na may high, meron siyang kapalit na low. Yung saya mo kanina, may kapalit na pagkababa pagkatapos. Yung pagbaba na yun ang nagko-cause ng craving. Hindi mo lang hinahabol yung saya, pero tinatakasan mo rin yung discomfort of the pain in the form of craving. So, yun nga, to really dive or dig this concept, mas mataas yung peak, mas mababa yung bagsak. At habang mas mababa yung bagsak, mas malala yung craving. So, hindi lang siya basta in-enjoy mo and then tapos. There's a cycle. You enjoy the thing, there's a drop, and then there's the crave, and then you repeat that cycle over and over again, especially if you're not aware of these concepts, and this is what really ruins us. So, dahil sa cycle na yun, your brain keeps looking for the next high. You feel bored, you look for stimulation, you repeat the cycle. And by repeating this cycle, we fall into desensitization or nagiging less sensitive tayo sa reward. Normal things start to feel less rewarding. The more you stimulate your brain, the harder it becomes to feel satisfied. And parang contradicting siya, no? Na when you chase these things, kala ko ba nasa spike yung dopamine ko? Bakit parang nagbe-behave ako in a way na parang wala akong dopamine? Bakit parang nawawalan ako ng gana? Di ba dopamine inducing nga itong mga ginagawa ko? And here's the reason behind that. While the dopamine hit from drugs, alcohol, or behaviors create temporary excitement, it also forces the brain to reduce the number of sensitivity of dopamine receptors to protect itself from overstimulation, leading to a chronic or long-term state of lower dopamine activity. So, hindi design yung brain na maging stimulated palagi. And how our environment is designed nowadays, yun nga yung phone natin, by reflex na lang, hindi nga tayo aware na kadalasan we reach for a phone, like pagising mo pa lang, you check things, notifications, and that itself spikes dopamine. And imagine combining all of the things that spike our dopamine throughout the day. So, checking our phone. May binibili kang food, you're waiting in line, nagche-check ka pa rin ng phone. So, parang wala nang pahinga yung dopamine system natin. And so, our brain tries to regulate itself para ma-protect siya from overstimulation, and this leads to yun nga, long-term state of lower dopamine activity. And parang nagiging deficient pa nga tayo sa dopamine. Kung kaya maganda talaga i-treat siya as currency. Kasi kung titreat mo siya na parang pera, pera, excuse me. Kung i-treat mo siya na parang pera, the more you spend it, nauubos siya. And the more na nauubos siya, lalo ka nawawalan ng gana, you try to desperately crave for more. And since cycle nga siya, lalong nauubos. And kapag low na yung dopamine mo, this is actually linked to depression. Kasi dopamine is responsible for us to be excited about life and things like that. It's also linked to Parkinson's disease and ADHD. Totoo yun. You guys can look this up on Google. And again, disclaimer lang, I'm not really an expert, pero these are things na natutunan ko sa mga experts, and I really, really, really want to be able to share it with people na nare-reach ng podcast na to. Okay, so next is we have this thing called Dopamine History. Hindi siya actually like hindi siya scientific term na ginagamit talaga ng mga scientists, pero it's a way for us to be able to understand this concept better. So, what it basically is kung ano yung nararanasan nating activity right now that induces dopamine, naapektuhan siya ng kung anong ginawa mo before it. And a very simple example is, kunwari, nag-scroll ka sa social media, and as you scroll, may nakita kang post, and it's not really interesting to you. Pero, bago mo nakita yung post na yun, meron kang isa pang post na nakita na sobrang na-excite ka. Pero, kung nakita mo muna yung post na hindi interesting muna, maaaring you would find that post a little bit more interesting. And that also includes yung mga activities na ginagawa natin. Like, nagtataka ako, I love gaming. I love video games. It's my form of de-stressing. Pero bakit parang mas nasa stress pa ako dahil hindi ko na ma-enjoy yung nilalaro ko. I just play for the sake of playing kasi I need to play or deserve ko mag-play after mag-work. Pero bakit hindi ko ma-enjoy yung nilalaro ko? And the thing is, prior to me playing video games, I have a couple of, other dopamine-inducing activities, or never ko pinagpahinga yung dopamine system ko. Kaya, ngayon nandito na ako sa oras ng playtime ko, I'm less sensitive to the reward that it gives. Boring na siya. And as a result of this, and I'm very, very ashamed of this, it leads me to go after something else that's dopamine-inducing, which is pornography. And I'm really ashamed of that. Kasi for me, and this depends naman talaga, di ba, from person to person. Like pornography and basically anything sexual is like the highest form of dopamine-inducing activity. And so, dahil boring na para sa akin tong mga things like gaming, things like socializing, ang go-to ko ng activity para ma-solve yung kine-crave kong dopamine hit is pornography. And I've talked about this in the past episodes. I'm I've been solving this through being okay with being bored and like really powering through the boredom. I do things like just, breathe, go out for a walk. I don't try to, like, the first thing I do when I wake up is I brush my teeth, I walk my dog, and then I go for a walk. I don't, as much as possible, if kaya, I don't even turn on the Wi-Fi of my phone yet, unless I need to listen or I want to listen to a podcast while I'm walking. But basically, I avoid anything that's highly stimulating. And so as a result of that, or rather, by doing that, I'm proud to say I'm 2 weeks sober from pornography. And I'm really happy about that. Parang siguro, I mean, let me just have this moment. It makes me emotional kasi I haven't really been friendly to myself, and I didn't realize this is something na is connected to that kasi halos araw-araw there's pornography in my life, and dahil nga lagi akong overstimulated, I always keep getting this crash afterwards na meron na akong, I'm deficient in dopamine na, causing me to lose drive in life. It even makes me feel like I don't deserve to be here. I even tell myself things like, if there's a chance I could pay with my life to bring back someone that's more deserving to live, I would do it. Sorry. Okay. Ganun ako dati. So, I'm really happy to say na I'm 2 weeks sober from pornography, and I've been doing specific practices kasi it has to be replaced with something eh. It doesn't just go away magically. Kaya I'm really making an effort. Kailangan may other things akong pwedeng magawa to replace the behavior, and sticking to that even though it's boring. And eventually, and we're gonna talk more about this later, we get resensitized, or we get sensitive to reward again. And so, yun nga, going back, I guess I went on a tangent there. I almost forgot about, what we're talking about in this part of the podcast, which is the dopamine history. How our past activities affect the dopamine that we get from our current activities. And so that's why it's really important to not always be stimulated. And we're going to talk about later the importance of boring breaks. All right. So, why hobbies feel boring? It's because of the repeated highs, and as we talked about earlier, the higher the dopamine levels, the deeper the crashes, and the lower the sensitivity. Your brain now expects stronger stimulation. Hence, I can't enjoy video games, which leads me to pornography. And so the simple things feel slow, dull, and boring. But here's an important clarification. You can't remove dopamine. Dopamine detox is not a thing, because dopamine is required by our bodies. Kasi nga, it's what's responsible for us to have drive in life, to want things, to pursue things. So the problem is not really dopamine. The problem is how we use it. It's a currency. It is overstimulation. That is the problem. We get desensitized from the reward of basically anything that we try to pursue in life, making things not worth pursuing at all. And that leads us to maybe behaviors or substances that can solve the problem of our cravings. And so now we're going to talk about how to resensitize. Paano ba mabalik yung want natin for the things that we normally like in life? You know, like if you like gaming, paano ba matutunan na ma-enjoy ko ulit maglaro? Or if you like going for walks or socializing or basically anything that um, that was usually the source of your dopamine spikes in a healthy way. These are the three things that we could do to help us enjoy those things again. So first is take boring breaks. So at work, magandang example yun. If we want to be able to work more efficiently, yung mga breaks na meron tayo, we can make that boring. And so that leads to the boring work being rewarding. Pero that takes time. So instead, sa work namin, I have, 15-minute break. What I do is, I just go for a walk in the treadmill. Ang mali ko nga dati is, tinatry ko sulitin yung mga breaks na meron ako. Pero, mas lalo siyang nakakaapekto sa aking dopamine system. And like we said, yun nga, with the dopamine history, our previous dopamine experiences affects the current dopamine experience. So if I try to make all of my breaks at work stimulating, after work, when I try to game, I'm basically desensitized and I can't enjoy this activity anymore. I'm just playing for the sake of playing dahil I should play, dahil deserve ko to after a hard day of work. And by repeatedly taking boring breaks, we give our dopamine system a chance to recover, to go back to baseline. That's what we've been talking about earlier. We have a baseline, we have a peak, and then the cravings. How we handle those cravings is really important. And a way to handle that is be okay with being bored. So do breath works, or may napakinggan pa nga ako. What he does is he just stares at a wall. And that's interesting. That's interestingly boring that I find it na I'm curious to try it. Tatry ko ngayon. Maybe I'll be able to resensitize my dopamine receptors even more. And the next thing that we could do is stop escaping boredom in small moments. And what I mean by that is, kuwari, nasa pila ka ng Starbucks, instead of reaching for your phone to kill the boredom while you wait, just stand there and wait. Don't do anything. Maybe focus on your breathing, observe your surroundings, but basically stop stimulating your brain in small moments like this because it adds up. It eventually adds up, waiting in line or waiting for someone to go back from the restroom, or ito maganda example for all the gamers out there. Most games, especially competitive games, have a matchmaking system. And while we are waiting for us to find a match, sometimes it may take 5 minutes. If you play Valorant or Dota 2, malalala na yung 10 minutes. Pero, guilty ako dito. What I do is, pag naghihintay, I'll tab or I reach for my phone. I'm trying to fill in the gaps, the small boring moments with stimulating activities. And that's already a problem kasi gusto ko nga ma-enjoy tong ginagawa kong paglalaro. Pero pinapatungan ko siya ng iba pang activity or I'm spending my dopamine currency in other activities, and these small moments add up. After you finish a match, you queue again, you find a match, and then that also will take, a few minutes. So keep on doing that over and over again. And based on what we've talked about so far, you will realize why you're not really enjoying the game anymore. And so that's it may be something small pero napaka-importante niya. Small things add up. And then the third thing that we could do to resensitize is to let experiences sink in. What I mean by that is, kunwari, lumabas kayo ng mga tropa mo, you had fun, you enjoyed, and pag uwi mo, mag-reflect ka. Para kang si Dora the Explorer. Tinatanong niya, di ba, by the end of an episode, what's your favorite part? I like that too. But it actually helps Kasi, if you reflect on what you did, you're extending the reward that you got from that thing that you just did. So, instead of pag-uwi mo, you jump into the next stimulating thing right away, maybe just sit outside, sit somewhere, think about, how do you appreciate your friends? Yun. Think about that. They made time for you. Tong lakad na to, you guys made it happen because you are important to each other. And as fuzzy as all this sounds, na-appreciate ko siya ngayon. Dahil part nung hindi ako okay after me breaking up with my ex, I really looked for stimulating things. I went on dates when realizing now I was just looking for something to elevate my dopamine. I wasn't looking for love. And what I need is to be with people that really matter. My friends, my family, my brother and sisters. The other day lang, I went out with my sister. Tinreat ko siya. Sumuniko kami. That's, I don't know, samgyupsal na rin yata yun. But anyway, these moments, we need to let them to sink in and appreciate. I think this is one of the things why my grandmother and my aunt, yung tita ko na nasa ibang bansa, they do this thing where they pray for everyone at the end of the day. They give thanks for, the blessings. I think that's a form of letting experiences sink in. So, even though I may not be religious, I'm certain that, or rather, I acknowledge the benefits that gives us. So, reflect on the experience. When you pause, your brain extends the reward from the experience. And another thing that is really helpful when we do this is memory and meaning from the experience becomes stronger. Instead of chasing the next high, you let the current one last longer. These are not hacks to feel good immediately. These are ways to retrain our brain to feel again. Kasi nga, although it's not exactly namamanhid, pero parang yun yung idea. Kasi nga, nadidesensitize na yung brain natin from the reward that we get from the things that we used to love. And so, I just want to close this by saying that the problem isn't that our hobbies became boring, it's that our brains become too stimulated, and sometimes learning to be bored again is what will allow us to enjoy life again. I appreciate you guys and thank you for listening. See you in the next episode.